I would like to start our event that will be focusing on NDC 3.0 in Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, and other countries which were preparing the NDC 3.0 this year. And we will discuss today during the 90 minutes, we will discuss how to make the NDCs 3.0 into ambitious, realistic, but actionable solutions. And first of all, I would like to start with introducing our panelists who joined us today online and offline. Unfortunately for online participants of the panel, we can't hear you here at the pavilion yet, but we are trying to fix this problem, and hopefully we will be able to hear you after the start of this event. So I would like to introduce our dearest panelists. It's Anніка Markovich, Engagement and Impact Director, Stockholm Environmental Institute. Annika, you're welcome to join me here. Frenk Joshua, CEO of Climate Investment Partnership. Dear Frank, I invite you to join us. Also here offline, we have Alena Rusnach, State Secretary of the Ministry of Environment of Moldova. Alena, you're welcome to join us. We also have our participants online. We have Jeyson Weysi, Energy Modeling Program Director and Senior Scientist from Stockholm Environmental Institute, US. We are going to be joined by Fuat Humbatov, who is the head of International Cooperation and Public Relations and the National Hydrometeorological Service of Azerbaijan. Also, hopefully, Kaham Diviani, team leader from NDC 3.0 preparation in Georgia, will join us during the event. We have online Ірина Пліс, founder and president of the Alliance for Energy Efficiency and Renewables. And also from Ukraine, we have Roman Podolets from the Institute of Economics and Forecasting of Ukraine. And before the start of today's discussion, I invite you to join watching the video, our project, IKI-Interface project that I represent. By the way, my name is Rima Kustim. I'm Program Component Manager at IKI-Interface Project Ukraine, that is supporting Ukrainian climate policy and biodiversity policy in its ambitious response toward the global climate crisis. And I invite you all to watch the video together about NDC process, to be on the same page on what NDC is and what is the role of NDC for all of the countries, including Ukraine. This video will focus on Ukraine in particular. So, welcome.
Зміна клімату завжди була природним процесом, але з 19 століття головним чинником стала діяльність людини – спалювання вугілля, нафти та газу. Вчені у всьому світі дійшли згоди. 1,5 градуси за Цельсієм – межа, після якої наслідки можуть бути руйнівними. Аби протидіяти масштабним наслідкам глобального потепління, у 2015 році країни світу підписали Паризьку угоду, головна мета якої – втримати потепління в межах 1,5 градуси за Цельсієм. Основним інструментом цієї угоди стали національно визначені внески, або НВВ – плани зі скорочення викидів та адаптації до зміни клімату, які оновлюються кожні 5 років. У 2025-му всі країни мають представити НВВ 3-го циклу. Україна підготувала свій другий внесок, що є першим кліматичним зобов'язанням, розробленим під час повномасштабної війни. Попри всі виклики, цей документ є не лише кліматичним зобов'язанням, але й може відкрити великі можливості для України. Зеленого відновлення, розвитку чистої енергетики та інноваційних секторів економіки, відновлення екосистем. І головне, це невід'ємна частина руху до ЄС. Над документом працювали українські та міжнародні експерти, щоб врахувати воєнні виклики, перспективи відбудови та євроінтеграційні цілі. Ціль України за НВВ-2 – скоротити викиди парникових газів більше ніж на 65% до 2035 року порівняно з рівнем 1990 року. Це крок до кліматичної нейтральності, зеленої економіки та інтеграції в ЄС.
Thank you very much. And our dearest panelists, I invite you to join me here. And as you understood, now we are on the same page on what NDCs are. And now we can start our panel discussion that will be focusing on NDC of the third cycle. And this event will be focused on the regional experience of Azerbaijan, Georgia, Moldova, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and other countries that Stockholm Environmental Institute is supported by. And I would like today to highlight these experiences and the main opportunities that NDC of the third cycle has given to those countries that have already developed it, and the upcoming challenges and ongoing challenges for these countries, and actionable solutions that can be made at the regional level and international level to support implementation of the NDC and making them really into investment document. So to open our panel discussion, I would like to give the floor to Anніка Markovich, who will be presenting from her extensive experience of climate policy, will be presenting how can NDCs become investment opportunities for these countries. So Annika, the floor is yours. I welcome you.
This may be? Yes, great. So thank you very much for inviting me. I must start by saying that this video was really basically summarizing what I'm going to say in my speech. So you can see it as a very good introduction. So my name is Anніка Markovich, and I represent the Stockholm Environment Institute, and SEI is a global research institute which is independent and is there in the interesting space between research and policy. So everything that has to do with translating research into policy in the field of environment and climate, that's where you can find us. And as was said, we have been working with a number of countries who are advancing in their EU processes and supporting them also with their NDCs. And I'm going to talk a little bit about three areas. The first is to turn NDCs into, well, basically from ambition to implementation. And the second is to talk about what we have done with Ukraine in this project. And the third is to tell you a little bit more about SEI and the work that we have done in the region. So the global stocktake has made one thing abundantly clear. We have entered a new era under the Paris Agreement. The first generation of the NDCs was largely about intent, right? We were charting our direction, we were signaling our resolve, and we were proving to the world that bold climate action is both necessary and possible. And then the second generation went further. It broadened our commitments to cover more sectors, linking the national ambitions to long-term decarbonization goals, and beginning the challenge, but very vital process of aligning the domestic policy with global climate pathways. And now, as we look ahead at the third generation, the NDC 3.0, we face new demands. This must be a phase that is designed not just by ambition, but by action. And it's time to focus on building the capacity to deliver, on sequencing our efforts wisely, and on building the systems and institutions that will turn commitments into results. And the success of an NDC will no longer be the scale of ambition on the paper, but the credibility of its pathway, the soundness of its economies, and the strength of the institutions that drive these sustainable progresses over time. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why in so many countries, the NDC is no longer viewed as a narrow environmental document. It has become a central instrument for national development and economic strategy, just as is what presented in the video. Today, the NDC shapes decisions at the highest level on industrial modernization, on energy security, on transport systems and infrastructure priorities, on agriculture reform and trade positioning, and on the way a nation plans its fiscal future. In this new era, climate action has actually become economic statecraft, a way of determining how a country competes, how it safeguards its citizens, and how it secures its economic resilience in an unpredictable world. So we see this most clearly in countries that are aligning with the EU regulatory and policy framework and the Fit for 55 agenda. Here, climate policy is no longer symbolic. It is foundational. It sets the terms of market access, it steers investments, and grounds long-term development visions. In Ukraine, for example, this alignment is actively shaping the frameworks of climate governance, of legislative reform, of just transition, and the architecture of the country's economic recovery. And we know what it takes to move from the visions that we had to actual results on the ground. And there is now robust evidence, clear and compelling, about what enables countries to move from planning to implementation. First, effective climate action demands more than a vision. It requires translating ambitions into results. And evidence shows that lasting progress happens when top government leadership and all the key ministries take shared ownership of the NDC, embedding it across national priorities. When the NDC becomes the shared mandate, driving the decision-making in finance, in economy, in energy, in planning, and in regional activities, it accelerates implementation and investments. This collective approach transforms the NDC into a powerful engine for industrial growth, competitiveness, public health, and inclusive long-term perspective. Secondly, implementation accelerates when climate priorities are integrated into fiscal and sector-specific planning, rather than treated as a separate add-on. And this means aligning the NDC with national development strategies, with sectoral roadmaps, with infrastructure programs, and annual budget cycles. In practice, this can involve tools such as climate budget tagging, which tracks and labels climate-related spending in public budgets, green taxonomies that define sustainable investments, and long-term energy and land use plans that provide predictability to investors, industries, businesses, and clarity to public agencies. When this integration happens, climate action no longer competes with development priorities. Instead, it's actively shaping the way development is pursued. So third, ambition attracts investments when there are clear, transparent, and investment-ready pipelines of action. And this means costed measures, responsible institutions, defined timelines, and monitoring systems that empower governments and adapt to conditions change. These systems do not only support donor reporting, they are what give investors, communities, and citizens the confidence that progress is both genuine and credible. And the real challenge, however, is not simply choosing the right technologies. Across regions and income levels, that the countries advancing the most are not always those with the boldest targets on paper, but those that have built the systems and institutions to turn those targets into reality. And experience now show a clear pattern. Consistent progress is achieved through strong governance, clear accountability, and flexible planning that allows for learning and adjustment. It is not easy. For Ukraine, the question of climate planning can't be separated from the broader challenge of national recovery and building of long-term resilience. Climate governance is being forged in the midst of a full-scale war, under conditions that in most contexts would suspend long-term policymaking. And yet, Ukraine has continued to legislate, to reform, and to look forward. This is truly amazing. In Ukraine, even amidst tremendous challenges, we have witnessed the rise of a modern climate governance system, an achievement that would be remarkable even in peacetime. And today, the country has a climate law that sets the long-term direction goal, achieving climate neutrality by 2050, and Ukraine's National Energy and Climate Plan now provides a coordinated framework helping guide decisions across all ministries and sectors. And the country is also introducing a phased approach to a national emissions trading system with the clear intention to eventually align with the European carbon market. And for the very first time, Ukraine is extending adaptation and transition planning to a regional level, right where reconstruction and recovery are happening on the ground. The process to update the NDC in Ukraine is being shaped by the need to rebuild infrastructure and industry in ways that are both modern and compatible with European markets and regulatory systems. And this is significant in the global context because it reflects a broader shift. The NDC is evolving from simply a climate commitment into a long-term economic and institutional planning roadmap. It is now intended to guide how investment is sequenced, how industries are modernized, and how Ukraine aligns itself with the European market rules, especially in sectors affected by the carbon border adjustment mechanism. And it is important to understand that Ukraine's recovery won't follow a straight and predictable decline in emissions. Instead, progress will vary across sectors and over time, requiring flexible and phased strategies that account for available resources and ongoing security risks. Because Ukraine is rebuilding infrastructure and industry now, it can leapfrog directly into the green industrial economy of the future. Renewable energy, green steel, electrified industry, resilient power systems, efficient buildings, and restored ecosystems. Ukraine is not only recovering, it has the opportunity to design the industrial base of the 21st century. The Stockholm Environment Institute's work in the Eastern Partnership region is focused on strengthening the systems that enable governments to lead their own transitions. We do not prescribe policy choices. Our role is to provide evidence, analytical tools, and institutional support, so to ensure climate governance is sovereign, durable, and grounded in national priorities. We work at the big picture design level, helping turn climate promises into real-world plans and decisions. And this means that we support governments and organizations in making infrastructure choices, developing sector strategies, designing modeling frameworks, and creating financing architectures. We also help design just transition plans and build systems to monitor and report on climate projects. And we have a number of examples how we have been working in these countries. But what I would like to say in the closing is that when we look towards the NDC 3.0, the crucial question is not simply how to commit to higher ambition, but how to build the institutions, the data ecosystems, the coordination platforms, and the financing signals that can turn the long-term goals into lasting reality. Because the success of the next NDC cycle will depend on whether transitions are designed to be credible, investable, and sustained for generations to come. And Ukraine shows us that this is possible, because even under the hardest conditions a country can face, Ukraine has continued to legislate, to plan, and to strengthen its climate governance. And this is a powerful lesson. Climate ambition is not a luxury of stability. It's a cornerstone of national resilience, of sovereignty, and economic recovery. Ukraine today has the opportunity not only to rebuild, but to leapfrog into a competitive climate-aligned economy. And the international community has a crucial role to play in supporting that vision. Thank you very much, and Slava Ukraini.
Slava, thank you very much, Annika, for these profound messages on the NDC 3.0. And indeed, NDC have become from the document as it was seen before, I think, as the single document that provided some high-level ambition of the country that would be provided onto the UNFCCC Secretariat and just uploaded there at UNFCCC website. It has become the document that serves as an instrument for the problems that are existing at the international, regional, and at the local level. So every country shapes now NDC in the way that is actionable and a response to the local problems. So I would like now to get to our panel discussion. And first of all, I would like to give the floor to Frenk Джошуа, who is the CEO of Climate Investment Partnership. And we will start from this. We'll continue the discussion on the international level. And my question to you would be... Yeah, dear friend. Yeah, can you hear us now? Yeah, super. So after Annika's speech, I suggest you to continue discussing on how NDCs can be an investment opportunities. And I would like to give the floor to you to discuss a little bit on what is the framework on global investment into climate policy is now existing and how the countries can make use of it for their climate ambitions.
Well, thank you very much. You've heard my name. It's Frenk Джошуа. You may have heard that before, but I don't know. One reason I am making that point is I've been in the carbon trading business from day one. When was day one? Day one was January of 1990. I was the guy at the UN in Geneva in 1990 who started the work on carbon trading. And not many people know that history. Now, how in? It was my idea. It was the idea of an English professor named Michael Grove. Some of you may have heard of. He was at Chatham House, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, when we were preparing for the Earth Summit that took place in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. So all of this goes way back, 30-something years. And here we are today, talking about not Kyoto Protocol, but Paris Agreement and NDCs. We have learned a tremendous amount in those 35 years. And that's what I wanted to say to you in terms of this discussion today about NDCs. Because decades ago, we were talking about Kyoto, we weren't talking about NDCs. And Kyoto was focused on individual projects, thing to do methodologies and baselining and all the rest of it. We've gone beyond that because we've had that experience. I was at Kyoto in 1997 when the politics played out, and it wasn't pretty. There were countries there that were supportive and wanted Kyoto, and the vast majority of countries did not want Kyoto. So how on earth did a UN conference where the vast majority were totally against it ended up approving it? That's a different conversation. If you want to know, I will explain it to you separately, otherwise it would take too long. But at the end of the day, the vast majority of the conference participants, the countries in that room at Kyoto, were totally dead opposed to the Kyoto Protocol on carbon trading. They wanted policies and measures. If you participate in UN meetings, you know, that's code word for taxes. Policies and measures equal taxes. And I was there. I've been to every single COP from COP 1 to, I don't remember which one. And then I stopped. I have to find a way out of it and, you know, clear my head and do something else. But we are now here. And what you've heard in the presentation before, talking about NDCs. I work for a company that's based in Chicago. And as you probably know, Chicago is one of the trading centers of the world. Commodities trading and all that. These guys are experts in trading. And that's where I work. But I bring the UN international perspective so that we don't go off the rails with all the Chicago stuff. My job is to keep these guys on track. And explain how the NDCs work, and you've heard it. I'm not going to go over that. But also the impact of that whole structure, which is very different from Kyoto. The structure of NDCs that enable the mobilization of financing on the large scale, which we could never have done under Kyoto. Not possible. But now we've got this completely different framework. And we're bringing in and incorporating the private sector with people who actually know what the hell they're doing in terms of fundraising, in terms of working with investment banks and so on and so forth. It's a completely different level that we are with the Paris Agreement compared to what we were doing under Kyoto. We did very good work. I mean, don't get me wrong. If we didn't have Kyoto, we'd never be here. So we had that transition from what we were doing project by project. And now we are in a different framework where we begin by understanding what is an NDC, which is effectively the country mapping its carbon emissions potential. That's what the NDC is. It's on a national scale. Project by project, nothing to do with national scale. But we then pick up from where the NDC leaves off and try to identify within that NDC framework where the best opportunities are so that you can aggregate them. And then you're talking business with the biggest bankers in the world. That's what we've done with the Paris Agreement. Obviously, there's still work to be done in terms of fleshing out the rules and understanding all of that. That's why we're having a conversation here today, is to understand the link between the national concept and evaluating and drilling down and understanding how that works and linking it to financing. And you do that at a large scale, you have more influence, you have a better chance of getting funding, especially for countries that have difficult risk analysis and ratings in the market, including Ukraine. So my company, this Chicago company, the name of it is Laconic Global. We are working closely with Friends of Ukraine because we think we have something to contribute. And we're open to ideas and ideas from people like you. You want to work with us, you want to fit into that, plug into that opportunity. That's what we do. And we have the skills to move that forward. And by the way, I actually been to Ukraine decades ago on Kyoto when we were just beginning to do the workshops and spread the ideas and so on, the gospel. So I've been to Ukraine once. A lady named Olga Gazanzade or something like that. Yes, she invited me to Ukraine. And I've been all over the place. But anyway, the reason I'm here is to tell you that we agree with the first speaker. We understand how that works. We understand markets. I understand carbon. And together we all one big family. So we support you.
Thank you. And thank you for these important messages. And of course, one of the messages is that building connections and building cooperation is important at every level to ensure the actionable solutions for climate change. And on this note, I would like to pass the floor to Sara Mіллар, CECG Program Director and Convener of the NDC Cook Network. I understand that your focus is on building international cooperation to support countries in developing NDCs. So what are the lessons learned you would like to share with the countries? Today we have the discussion on the examples of Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and other countries. Most of them are developing countries or with economies in transition. So what would be the lessons learned for these countries that you would like to share here, that you may be learned from the NDC 3.0 process and maybe for the further work on the implementation of the NDCs?
Yeah, thank you very much. My name's Sara Mіллар. I'm a program director at a pooled philanthropic fund called CG. So we work with 7 of the global endowed climate foundations, and some people describe us as the COP30 grant. And I think that's probably an accurate description, but we're working at the nexus of climate and development. And I think that's a perfect place to start in terms of the conversation around NDCs. And I've had the pleasure over the last 18 months of convening something called the NDC Action Network. It's a network of around 250 different organizations, science, academia, the business groups, any different parts of the UN family, including UNDP, UNFCCC, and the Secretary General's Climate Action Team. Because I think what that tells us and sees is that this is a whole of society effort. I think in this third round of the NDCs, we've talked a lot about this being, we need economy-wide, all greenhouse gases, everything everywhere, all at once, as I think a famous movie, Blind said. And this is exactly the approach that many of us have taken. Thank you. Yeah, because when we're thinking about, essentially, as you were saying, Frank, transforming your economy, you require everybody to be all hands on deck, because you need the analytics to understand what your baselines are, what it is that you're trying to change from and what you're trying to change towards. You need diplomacy and political outreach, because you need to have that really strong buy-in at the political level. And when I say the political level, I mean at the national level, at the subnational level, with your local authorities, with your mayors, with your regions, because they all have different levers to pull in order to do the implementation. You need to have the businesses and the private sector and the bankers and the investors working absolutely hand in hand, figuring out what it is that we need and who's going to pay for it and what does that look like and how do we make the economic case for that to happen. And you need really, really concrete strategic communications, because you're essentially trying to bring everybody on this incredibly difficult journey. It's an exciting journey, but it's complicated and it's difficult. And we know that the political headwinds around climate action and net zero are really challenging at the moment. So in the UK, for example, we have quite an aggressive, I think is probably the way I would describe it, media. And they'll concoct around, we're going to rip out your boiler and we're going to force you to have a heat pump. And I think we saw similar in Germany and other parts of Europe and the EU on this. And of course, that's not the case, but why let facts get in the way of a good. And then I think last but not least, we need the analytics, we need the politics, we need really good strategic communications, but we also need public mobilization and participation. So we need civil society to be raising their voices, making sure that the politicians know that this is what's required, this is what is wanted, this is what's desirable, because it's good for the cost of living, it's good for the money in people's pockets. And again, to what you were saying, Frank, it's about how we're translating it to make it exciting and enticing and irresistible, so that people want to do it, so they feel confident and the politicians then feel confident, which then makes the businesses feel confident, because you've got the right regulatory environment, you've got the right politics, and you've got the right level of support from your citizens. And so that's what we've been trying to collect, curate through the NDC Action Network. I think underwriting all of it has been this economic argument. And Simon Steele, and I think the General in particular, have been really, really strong on this point. They've tried really hard. NDC is not a sexy term. It doesn't describe what it is. And I think they've done a really great job of, again, the stratcoms around improving the narrative. These are economic plans, these are climate prosperity plans, these are investment plans. you know, the level of detail in the NDC, it could be described as an investment perspective if it goes into that level of detail. And that's what people are looking for. And I think what's been really interesting this time round is, you know, everybody pretty much missed the 10th of February deadline, but, you know, it's a UN deadline, so these things are quite fungible. But what's been encouraging is when the parties, when the countries have presented their NDCs, they're in such a level of detail that is so different from what it was 5 years ago in the run-up to COP26 in Glasgow, that people can really go in and see line by line what it is that you're going to do. You know, an anecdote, you know, we're going to decarbonize transport. Great. How are you going to do that? And I was talking to Evgeny about last night. You know, well, you're going to decarb your transport system. So what does that mean? Well, it means you're going to electrify your bus service. So if you're an electric bus manufacturer, you're going to be pouring through it going, oh, that's very interesting. There's a market opportunity. I will go have a look. I will go and have a conversation with those policymakers and those procurement officers in that country, and you know, repeat that against every measure within the NDC, and all of a sudden you've got, you know, something really exciting, really tangible, really understandable that the manufacturers can speak to, the investors can speak to, the investors can speak to, and I think this framing of it around a prosperity plan, that there isn't a trade-off here. This is something that is exciting, that's going to add value, going to help your citizens with the cost of living, that's going to improve your jobs and your security, and that's absolutely the framing that we want around NDCs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sara. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for, indeed, NDC is not a sexy term, and it's nice. It's nice to see people talking about the NDCs, and you can see those people who are working in this topic talking about the NDC in such a way that you are talking about this. So it's nice to see you all at this panel, and I would like to continue from our international perspective and coming closer to national perspective with the NDC 3.0. And I would like to give the floor to Alona Rusnac, State Secretary of the Ministry of Environment of Moldova, and present a little bit the experience of Moldova with NDC 3.0. As you know, Moldova's NDC is pretty ambitious, and we share with Moldova ambition to join the EU in the upcoming future. And of course, I would like to invite Alona to present a little bit how this experience with NDC 3.0 was different from previous NDCs, and what lessons learned you have already applied in this round of NDC, and what challenges you faced during this round of NDC, and actions you're going to make in the upcoming future to solve all of these challenges. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and indeed, thank you for the history. I mean, in 1990, yeah, I was born. That's good, you know. So in a way, you know, I was thinking about NDC, at least hoping in school that I'm thinking of NDC. Yeah, so it's a really interesting panel, and thanks for letting us share our experience, NDC 3.0. I'd like to say that historically speaking, we started with the NDC 1.0 in 2015 when we joined the Paris Agreement in 2015. Then in 2020, we had the NDC 2.0. In 2025 is the 3.0. So walking through the NDCs, I'd like to say that our courageous experts set very high targets, because they compared to NDC 2.0, which were unconditional, was 71%, 70%, and then conditional was 88%. We understood that we will not achieve it. It is necessary a lot of investment. So that's why in the updated NDC in 3.0, we have actually included the ambitious targets, but their ambitious targets, they were a bit ambitious compared to NDC 2.0. So basically, it's NDC 3.0. It's 71% to 2030 compared to the year 1990, and 75% to 2035 compared to the year 1990. Through all this journey actually started with a great partnership with the NDC partnership. Yep. And I remember the first journey when I first joined COP Life in Dubai in 2023. I think it was my first. And the first pavilion that we visited was NDC. So it was a law from the first sign because through that, the NDC partnership with JZ walked us through the drafting NDC, now implementing NDC. We have a facilitator in our home country. We have an assistant, and I think there's only one or few countries that have it. But not only that, is that our partners actually, we started for very collaborative work on NDC. So NDC, it's a kind of connecting partners, I call it, with the state institutions. And I think for the first time we sat together with all the partners, with the NDC partnership, GIZ, with the UNDP, with the IOM, with the UNICEF, with the UNEP. So all partners, they sat together being part of the big group, and we did it. So basically the National Office for Implementation of Environment projects with their experts were responsible for the mitigation part, but for adaptation was responsible UNDP. So basically now we set our targets, but before that we would like to mention that the legal framework, the solid legal framework that we created, it's long climate action that was adopted in 2024. So it's a kind of umbrella for NDC 3.0, but also the National Committee for Climate Change and a whole bunch of the programs that actually are helping, the National Adaptation Program, Low Emission Development Program, and now it's the baby Low Emission Development Strategy 2050 that is a concept, but we hope to deliver the baby by 2026, and it will be a huge baby because we need it, and we promised for our bilateral screening in Brussels in this June. We passed the test, we passed it successfully, and I'm happy that before going to the Brussels, we had our successful submission of the NDC in May. We were 21st country to submit it. So anyway, it's really ambitious. I don't want to keep you more, but I want to mention that this is a very alive NDC. And I can promise that it's very alive and very dear because it's quite costly financially for our country, small country. We understood that in order to be part of the adaptation, mitigation, also all the actions and all the homeworks that the ministries of environment and our ministry have to implement, we need to work very closely with the all. And that's why we have our EU for Climate Resilience project implemented by JZ. It's a regional project. Thank you so much. Indeed, it's kind of working as a main part for the mitigation with the MRV, with the accreditation and government decision. Now we're going to a group of around 8 people are going to Estonia to see the MRV, how it is like live MRV, as they call it, and experienced MRV. And also we are working through the whole this stuff, but because, you know, like bunch of people, bunch of experts are working on mitigation, bunch of experts are working on adaptation. Also, I'd like to mention that we are working on our NECP. It's also aligned with our NDC, and it's working. A Minister of Energy was considered one of the most ambitious and successful in implementing all the legal frameworks. I would like to say that on the part of the Minister of Energy as the bigger and the supporting system, but in particular the polluters that we have in Moldova, there are not so many, and then we have like 19 companies, you know, that are big polluters. We are watching them closely, but also trying to help them. This is important because you cannot just watch and monitor and say, hey, don't pollute too much, because actually they are helping us, our economy, they are hitting us, they give us electricity. So you cannot just close everything, you know, staying cold and waiting for your NDC to be achieved. Yeah, you have to be very smart in terms of locally, as you mentioned, regionally, because, you know, with the neighbors trying to achieve the NDC, the same ETS, you know, there's so one a hot topic because the energy community is kind of watching us, trying to have a very love affair with Ukraine on ETS regional. We're trying to resist and say, no, you are not ready. Our companies are not ready. And in general, this is very costly for us. So leave us apart, and we want step by step to be implemented. So all this journey actually is really, like, and this is regional, but also we have to think in terms of the European integration. We have only 2,000 directives to be implemented, transposed in our legislation, 200 mandatory, and countless, the regulations that we have, but also internationally, the obligations that we took in base of the Paris Agreement. So all this melting pot, that we are dealing daily and trying to implement the carbon tax, trying to implement to build the infrastructure, to adapt the company, agricultural, the domains. It's just a homework, and I think it's a really a challenge for the Ministry of Environment. But it makes us, build the character, I would like to say, and it makes us a good negotiator, because this is about negotiation in the country. We're kind of, negotiating without the ministries, subordinate institutions. Regionally, EU best negotiator we have to be, because we have to negotiate our transition periods, and we are trying to negotiate the ETS transition period, but also very promising for the partnership that we assumed and that they're working us through. So thank you so much. I tried to be as short as possible.
Thank you so much, Alena. And of course, congratulations on a work well done on the NDC and on the screening process. From Ukraine, I would like to say that we share this screening process and NDC process at the same time. So I understand how hard it could be for the government. So you've done an enormous job this year and during the past year. So I think when the Ministry of Environment has worked on this job so efficiently, you will be successful on anything in actionable solutions for implementing the NDCs and other climate documents that you are preparing. And now we are moving to other experiences. Alena, are you staying with us? Yeah, you're staying with us. Okay, because we have something for you. I would like to pass the floor to our other expert who is working at the national level with the modeling, with the NDC preparation. This is Jayson Weysi, Energy Modeling Program Director and Senior Scientist at Stockholm Environmental Institute, US. So Jayson is joining us online. Jayson, please share your experiences with the countries you've been working with, and what are the lessons learned during the NDC 3.0, and what would you like to share to our audience today regarding the lessons learned and actions forward for the NDC 3.0 process?
Thank you very much. If it's all right, I will share a couple of slides here to animate this part of the presentation. So good afternoon to everybody, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today. As Remy said, my name is Jayson Weysi. I'm the director of the Energy Modeling Program at Stockholm Environment Institute, and I want to thank the organizers of this panel, and especially our hosts from the government of Ukraine, for allowing us to be in the pavilion and to do this today. It's a great pleasure to be here, to meet some new colleagues and to see some old friends. So I've been supporting climate change mitigation planning in Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and West Asia for a number of years. And in that time, I've seen firsthand some of the important developments that we'll talk about in this session, and we've already started to talk about. To help set the stage for some of those countries' specific achievements, I want to share with you a cross-country perspective that's based on SEI's work supporting the development of NDCs around the world since the advent of the Paris Agreement, but including now for the NDCs 3.0. Now, we're actively involved with a number of countries supporting mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage, and finance analyses. So now we're sitting in 2025, and countries are submitting their third NDCs, and about more than half of countries have now submitted. So we're actually at a moment where we can start to step back and ask ourselves how well it went, what have we learned, and what can we take away from it going forward. And based on what we've seen firsthand in a number of countries, as well as our discussions with partners around the world, I think there have been some key advances in this cycle of NDC preparation, and there are some persistent remaining challenges. I want to highlight a few of those for you, and also reference some of the achievements in the region as I do that. And on the positive side, I think we've seen, and this goes back to something that Annika mentioned in her presentation, we have seen in this cycle, as well as in the prior cycle of NDCs, a real broadening of NDCs to encompass multiple sustainable development objectives. This is a great thing because it means that we're moving beyond, especially for the lower emitting countries, moving beyond just using NDCs as a way to try to cut greenhouse gas emissions, but really trying to use them more holistically to advance sustainable development. That includes climate change adaptation, but other development goals as well. A good example of this, I think, is in Central Asia, is in Kazakhstan, where we've just been supporting the development of the NDC 3.0, which is just on the cusp now of being submitted. In that NDC, there's a major component on climate change mitigation, and there are climate change mitigation goals, but also there's a real emphasis on climate change adaptation, specific adaptation measures and financing requirements, and then also a component focusing on loss and damage and how we can make communities, especially the most vulnerable communities, whole as they suffer damages that cannot be avoided from climate change. Another big advance in this cycle especially is the more serious treatment of finance that we're seeing. We have seen a number of countries develop finance plans right alongside their NDCs, as well as costed measures for mitigation and adaptation. Another example from the region is Uzbekistan. They just submitted their NDC. Recently, it quantifies investment requirements for mitigation and adaptation, gaps in those financing requirements between now and 2035, and then strategies for closing the gaps. So that's all for the good because it means that we can move beyond just planning and really move toward bankable projects that can be financed and can lead to implementation on the ground. And then a final advance I would point to is the continued improvement and integration between NDCs and long-term low-emission development strategies. Many more countries have long-term low-emission development strategies now than they did even 5 years ago. And we're seeing those strategies mentioned explicitly in NDCs and mitigation targets aligning with those longer-term targets. I think there's more work to be done in that area. And in some countries, the long-term strategy target is mentioned, but the way that the shorter-term decarbonization objectives in the NDC align with the long-term target is not super clear. But I think there's positive movement in the right direction here. And then in terms of some of the challenges that we see that remain, I still see that there are countries that do a better and countries that do a worse job of governing the NDC process. And I'm talking about the development of NDCs as well as their implementation. What cannot happen, a recipe for failure, I think, is if the NDC is just the province of the Environment Ministry. Countries that are more successful take a whole of government and a whole of society approach with broad consultations and broad development of the NDC, and then implicating multiple stakeholders in NDC implementation as well. And complementing this, it's critical that there be high-level government support for the entire NDC process. And this, I think, is something that Annika mentioned as well. Another issue that we still see is that on the mitigation side, many countries still have fragmented modeling or quantitative analyses underlying their mitigation commitments. So they're producing their mitigation analyses and their emission trajectories using multiple models that might not have consistent assumptions in them. And this undercuts the legitimacy and the implementability of NDCs. And it's a particular emphasis for us at SEI. We develop a tool called the Low Emissions Analysis Platform, or LEAP, that's probably one of the most widely used tools for modeling for NDCs, and it's very explicitly designed to be an integrated tool so that there can be that consistency across sectors in the analyses. And then a final issue I would flag is, even though this is the third time around in NDC development, we have seen a number of countries underestimate the time required to do the NDC well. And some of this is related to internal political processes, some of this is related to organizational challenges. But the fact remains that if you don't allocate, in our view, probably 6 to 12 months to develop an NDC update, and then it's going to be really hard to do it well, because there are many steps that are required to do it well and with legitimacy. Stakeholders have to be broadly consulted. There needs to be iterative development of the analyses. There needs to be iterative development of the written outputs, and then finally validation of the entire analysis. So that really does take quite a long time. And we've seen a number of countries, unfortunately, in this cycle get into a situation where they had to try to rush it, and that has impacted on the quality of the NDCs in some cases. But overall, I think I'm optimistic about what's happened in this third round of NDCs. The ratcheting of mitigation ambition continues to operate, and the broadening of the scope of NDCs is very salutary. And I'm encouraged by the work, especially in the economies in transition in the lower income countries where we work predominantly. I'm really encouraged by the efforts that have been put forward and by the progress that's been made. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason, and thank you for this integrated approach and pointing out lessons learned from the NDC 3.0 process. And it's really nice to hear that you're optimistic about how the process went in several countries. And I think this is the picture mainly from all of the world regarding the NDC 3.0, and it gives us the motivation to work further. And probably in the next round of NDC, the more actions and more investments and more actionable solutions will be shown by the countries. Thank you so much. And I would like to pass the floor to our next speaker, Roman Podolets from Ukraine, from the Institute of Economy and Forecasting. My colleague who have been working on the NDC 3.0, but Roman with the Institute have been participating in previous NDC rounds in Ukraine and also in other climate strategies modeling. So Roman, the floor is yours. Please share with us the lessons learned from Ukraine from this process, how this process differs from the previous process in Ukraine, because this NDC 3.0 was the first climate ambition climate document that was prepared during the war and incorporates the impacts on the war on the economy and natural resources and on the society. So what are the main lessons from Ukraine, and what are the actions that you see for the upcoming future for Ukraine that are necessary to be taken in order to achieve our climate goals, including climate neutrality by 2050?
Thank you very much, Rima. Very much appreciate for letting me have this to participate in this talk today. And as there is not so much time, I will just specify. I will talk about one obstacle or challenge that we had during this process of preparation of this second NDC or NDC 3.0. And about the main, as for me, one of the main lessons that we've got during this process. So the obstacle is obvious. This is the real objective challenge to develop such a strategy document during the war. But actually, what this means that developing the strategic document within the active war. Firstly, this is the loss of capacity, and capacity not just in terms of the public governments, but actually in all spheres, because this is just for our colleagues to understand that about 10 million Ukrainians had to leave the country. This is like 25% of the whole population in Ukraine, and that's why there is a real deficit of professionals in all these spheres, and of course in the governance, in the analysis, in providing data information, and the second obstacle is the challenge with the statistics data, because right from the very beginning of the full-scale invasion 4 years ago, the information, most of the statistical information, and first of all in the energy sector, it was according to the specific regulation, it was not available, and that is why that is not possible. That is unusual for the researchers to make the analysis to ground the regulation or to make any kind of modeling or any kind of estimation in the situation where firstly, you do not pretty well understand the current situation. What is the current situation? But if you were if you did know about this situation, this information, this current information could be not very much useful because actually if you make the regulation, if you make a model estimation about some specific sector or about some specific factory, you're absolutely clear that this factory, this power plant could be totally damaged with the next missile attack. That is why what is the main challenge? Considering these main challenges, I do understand that we've got a huge uncertainty in the effectiveness of those regulations and effectiveness and let's say quality of those modeling estimations we've got. And considering this huge uncertainty, I do understand the level of the NDC target that was agreed by the government, adopted by the government just recently, as you may know. And we will talk about this a bit later. Then about the lesson what we have. In order to explain the reason why I should talk about this lesson, this benefit actually what we've got, I should say that yes, we were engaged in the preparations of the first NDC, and this work took us 3 years in order to develop this document. Because actually, why this took so much long? Because actually we learned how to follow all the procedures, to keep all the methodological recommendations about this particular document or about some specific indicators. But what was even more important, that we learned how to introduce those results of our studies to the wider audience and to the policymakers, and in order to how to make the bridge between experts and policymakers, how to make this acceptable by the governments. And after these 3 years of our work, the quite ambitious document was developed, the first Ukrainian NDC. And after that, our next document that we were engaged in preparation, it was the NSCP. We already talked today. It was mentioned that NDC, NSCP, the low emission development strategy, this is a document, let's say, for the same family. That is why the next document, very much aligned document to the first NDC, was the National Energy and Climate Plan in Ukraine. It was developed already not within 3 years as NDC, but within I would say within half of a year, or maybe somewhere longer. But again, because the expert society was already introduced in Ukraine and growth in Ukraine, and it was ready for such kind of task. And a lot of it was not just one organization, it was not just one institute or think tank. Various institutions were engaged in this process, but each institution knew the role, what they have to provide, how they have to participate in this process. After the NSCP, there was developed the process of development of the low emission development strategy, and the final in this process was the development of the second NDC. But while preparing the second NDC, again, the same full of not the same, but more or less the same pool of experts was engaged in this process, and this pool of experts was ready to address all the tasks needed in order to develop the confident document. Within the preparation of the NSCP, the policies and measures were collected, were estimated the effects, the modeling scenarios were already developed. That is why for the NDC revision of the NDC, we actually have a big bulk of the required analytical basis. That is why, considering all this, I would say that the very main lesson, as for me, is the critical importance of the professional expert society in Ukraine, and I'm really proud that in Ukraine we do have this society that actually acting as an additional driving force in Ukraine and in climate governments, together with the government and together with business. But actually the climate, this expert society as a representative of a civil society drive most of the changes and more the deliverables we get from this climate actions. As for the NDC itself as an NDC target, yes, probably in Ukraine, what was adopted by the government, probably one could say that it could be a bit more ambitious. We could expect for a bit more ambitious target. But on the other hand, again, getting back to the huge uncertainty we have now, on the one hand, I do understand the position of the government, but on the other hand, I would say that policies and measures that are already announced and that are already implemented are much more ambitious in Ukraine than the target formally adopted by the government. That is why the policies and measures are important, and as I see now, as I can judge, that the attention to the effectiveness of these policies measures, to the estimations, analysis of implementation of this or that measure are really high in Ukraine. And as I understand, we will proceed with the investigation of the policies and measures needed to implement the NDC, regardless of some specific target. But we do understand the directions, we do understand the priorities, and policies and measures drive, not just the target. Thank you very much. Hope that was interesting. Because for me, experience of my colleague is truly interesting, and thank you very much for initiating this talk today.
Roman, thank you for your presentation, and thank you for presenting indeed the role of civil society and different stakeholders in Ukraine that are driving climate action inside of Ukraine, and of course, to drawing the attention to the biggest challenge in Ukraine. It's uncertainty about the end of the war and uncertainty that interferes with all of the planning of different policies in Ukraine currently. And thank you for drawing attention also to the need of implementation and solutions. And following on this topic, I would like to pass the floor to Ірина Пліс, who is working in Moldova at the local level, where the main implementation is taking part. So Irina, what are the lessons learned and experiences and best cases you would like to share from the local level in Moldova that you have been in touch with, you have been supporting, and what of those lessons could be incorporated into the national level policies, and how the NDC 3.0 effective implementation could be ensured, including via the local level implementation?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for this invitation. I'm really honored to speak about my experience. I'm a director of the local NGO, Alliance for Energy Efficiency and Renewables, and at the same time, I'm a country expert for the project Covenant of Mayors for Energy and Climate. And yes, I can speak about how we are achieving or contributing to achieving to the NDC goals in Moldova, because we were not directly involved in its development, although everything what we do is strongly aligned with the implementation of the national policy. And first of all, I would like to say that our main target group are the local public authorities with whom we are actively working, supporting them on energy and climate planning. And mainly this is done through the European platform, which is called the Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, which really has become the effective tool, the most effective tool for turning national climate ambitions into local action and measurable results. Covenant of Mayors is the largest European initiative launched by European Commission, which supports local public authorities who have committed to reduce CO2 emissions at the local level with specific target. And this is mainly done through planning, like the development of the sustainable energy and climate action plans that integrate both mitigation and adaptation measures, helping communities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, improve energy efficiency, and strengthen climate resilience. I would like to say that for the Eastern Partnership, there was set a goal, which is minus 40% of CO2 emissions by 2050. It also sets the long-term goal of achieving climate neutrality by 2050. And this target has come into force since this year, 2025. And the main need, of course, is coming from understanding the national needs of implementation of NDC. And I would like to say that the target of minus 40% by 2050 didn't emerge overnight. It was built on a consultative process involving national authorities, local governments, experts, and development partners. We thank very much our national coordinators, the Ministry of Environment and Mrs. Rusnak, who is present today at the event, and the Ministry of Energy, who have strongly contributed to this process. This goal is found to find a balance between ambition and visibility, because as you understand, the infrastructure, the geopolitical situation, and capacities are still much to be desired in order to reach the high set level of the goals. During the consultation process, we revealed several important insights that I would like to mention. As I said, first of all, this is the limited institutional and financial capacity that cannot directly influence some of the most important emitting sectors. Especially, we are talking about residential sector and transport sectors, some large parts of the private economy where local public authorities can hardly contribute. And secondly, in order to meet any long-term target, municipalities must gain access to dedicated financial mechanisms, which is quite a challenge. And in this regard, I would like to say that Moldova is progressing. Last year, there was established a national energy efficiency fund for the residential sector, which helps residents to do investments in home renovation, heating system modernization, and many other measures that help reduce CO2 emissions. However, as I said before, many municipalities still lack technical expertise, reliable data sources, access to finance, as well as reporting mechanisms at the national level, meaning that how they would report local achieved results to the national database. So we are still working on it. As for our citizens, I would like to say that Moldova has survived 4 major energy crises triggered by difficult geopolitical situation and the war in Ukraine. And our citizens, they understand fully the importance of energy efficiency, and for them it's not just a word, but it's a matter of security and survival. We from practical experience, I want to say that we have a huge potential for achieving NDC goals. Although, of course, cooperation at multi-level should be ensured, and I cannot say, but we are looking forward to the new perspective of Moldova's accession process to the European Union, where we hope we will have all this access to EU funds, new standards, programs, which will accelerate the modernization of infrastructure, promote renewable energy, and drive low-emission urban development.
Thank you, Irina. I'm sorry
Yeah,
to
thank you
interrupt
very
you.
much.
Thank you so much. It was so insightful, and thank you for drawing attention to both success stories and gaps that are still in Moldova and probably in other countries that are those expertise is presented in here. We are still have 15 minutes for our Q&A session. So I would like to invite our panelists back to the floor. If you would like, you can sit there and answer the questions. Probably I would start with my questions. My first question would be mainly to Annika and Frank. Maybe Jason would like also to join this in answering this question. After hearing all of these presentations from different countries' perspectives, what recommendations would you like to give to those countries to make their NDC 3.0 fully actionable and making it into fully investment opportunities at their own perspective in their own countries?
Thank you very much for that question. And I think what is important and what has been emphasized already many times is the whole of government approach. And the fact that each and every minister of the cabinet needs to be able to speak to this NDC, and to make sure that you demonstrate that the whole of the government is behind it, because it's an investment plan. This is also not easy for my country, Sweden, or for many other countries who are, in that sense, maybe a little bit further down the road, but to have that whole of government approach. Then I think one of the big challenges is to bring the NDC down to the people, and to really get people excited and enthusiastic about implementing the NDC. So I think that is something where we have to work together and to showcase different examples and to learn from each other how we can engage with the general public on this in the implementation. I think that's really very important. Thank you.
Okay. My background is more in the trading side of it rather than the data mining, etc. But as a trader with the company in Chicago, obviously the NDC is critical to all of that, because without that, you can't do anything else. And so for us, really, really important. But our main focus is then to move from NDC to identifying projects that are going to enable us to remain in business and lower our costs so that we could do even more. Because if that doesn't happen, then it doesn't matter how many NDCs you have, investors are not going to spend money. So we fully support the NDC process. We want to move as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible, because without that, we have nothing. And we don't want to be in that situation.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Thank you, Frank. And maybe to follow up on this, your answer, what are the risk factors that are still in those countries that are represented here that scares the investors the most? And how those risks can be reduced? Maybe like 1-2 recommendations to our countries, how to reduce the risk for investors.
There is no such thing as risk-free investing. It doesn't exist. So it's a question of being able to rank your risk and understand how to manage those risks. And in each country, it's different. But essentially, it's a risk management business that we are in. When you're trading, every trade you make is a risk. It does not guarantee that you're going to make money on it. Even if you have all the contracts signed and dotted and whatever, that deal can go wrong anytime. And so it's important that you work with experienced organizations that have been in the trading business a long time and have the capital reserves to manage their risk going forward, because it's never guaranteed that you're going to make money. We would love to make money, but it's never guaranteed. Now, moving from there to countries like Ukraine and so on, I believe that it's always possible to find solutions if you broaden the scope of the institutions involved in all of this, if you work together. If you don't, you're in trouble. But if we all work together, for example, you have the discussion previous, they were talking about the EBRD and what EBRD can do. They're talking about private insurance companies and what they can do. And we're talking about private traders in Chicago and what they can do. When you put all of those resources together, you are in a much better place than if you try to do it all on your own, or to start from zero or whatever. So it's a collaborative effort that ends up being a risk management job. And then you'll make money. But everybody has to be on the same plane. And you don't want a situation where some companies are in and they want to get out early, you know, and then you have disputes and you end up in, you just spend a lot of time and money on nothing. So it's really important that you choose your partners who you're going to work with, and this is a long-term vision, and everybody's aligned in terms of the risk and the capital required and so on and so forth. It is complicated.
So much, Frank. Thank you for this advice, I would say. And of course, we have already discussed it. I think every one of our speakers have already named this approach, whole of society, whole of government approach. And my next question would be to Jason. Jason, as your master of modeling, how would you see the role of the modeling in facilitating the implementation itself? So after the NDC is approved, climate goals are set, how the modeling can facilitate the government and all of the stakeholders of this process in ensuring the efficient implementation of NDCs and other climate policies?
Yeah, thank you for that question. guess I would probably point to two things in response to that. But first, I would say, though, that the purpose of modeling future emissions or the evolution of the economy, it's not necessarily to make predictions, because no one really knows how the future is going to turn out, but it's to allow you to understand the range of likely future possibilities and how your different interventions in these complex systems could produce impacts. And so the first thing I would point to then is that in the process of devising the NDCs, modeling is critical because it allows you to understand the potential impacts of different measures and policies that the government may be thinking of taking. And that then can lead to implementation if you do some of the things that Annika mentioned in her presentation. If you get very specific about the interventions that you're going to make, the measures that you're going to implement, who is responsible for them, what the timetable is, what the investment needs are, and where the money is going to come from. All that paves the way for implementation, and the modeling is part of what enables that. So that's sort of the first thing I would point to. But then after, and this is more directly in response to your question, after the NDC is issued, and now you're moving into the implementation phase, the modeling can continue, I think, to be useful as a way of status checking where you are and assessing. You'll know what your implementation is of different measures to date. You'll know how emissions are evolving through your emission inventories, or energy consumption is evolving through your national energy balances. And modeling can help you understand then what are you on track to get to. Where are you pointed toward, and what course corrections might need to be made. So I think modeling can operate in conjunction with more traditional MRV processes, which are just kind of looking at what you said you were going to do and whether you've attained that yet. It can help you understand, given where you are, given what you've done to date, where are you headed in the next 5 years and in the next 10 years, and what course corrections might be needed. And that can lead to either potentially new measures or adjustments to existing measures with implications for implementation as well.
So much, Jason. And my next question would be to Alena. Yeah, Alena, it's quite a tricky question for you since you're the representative of the government. So what piece of legislation or piece of policy do you see for Moldova, or maybe number of policies do you see in Moldova in the upcoming year needs to take to implement in order to ensure that the goals you have set in your NDC will be achievable? What the most important and maybe the most urgent pieces of policy are you going to implement in the upcoming years to ensure the effectiveness of your policies?
Well, thank you so much. And indeed, it's a really good question. As I mentioned, we are really working hard and fighting for our strategy, low emission development strategy 2050, that would help us to implement our NDC. But nevertheless, it's not only about policies, because in terms of the policies, we can update the law on climate action, we can update the national adaptation program, we can update any other programs. It's about the real actions that you have to do. And the real action is the discussion that it was mentioned here many, many times. It's a dialogue, because the updating the law does not mean that you will have an implementing NDC. But a goal that you will achieve slowly, step by step, that is really important. And project by project, like we have two main projects in the Republic of Moldova. This is a first aid project, and the project that is up until 2032 to afforestate 145,000 hectares. This is waste management project, where we have ambitious targets to reduce our methane and have align it to the NDC. So this is a live projects that actually would implement your NDC. And as more projects you will have in the water management, more projects in adaptive, in agriculture, more projects that you will have with the private sector to be on board. And private sector, it's really key beneficiary. So long private sector is not very appealing, and you can draft any laws and any bylaws for the private sector as long they will not see their kind of interests. And you have to work hard as a government for the interests, because like attracting the afforestation or I don't know, waste management or whatever, but having a legal framework, also all the key stakeholders involved in the NDC, and also partners to discuss, because we've learned our lesson when we drafted the NDC, because at the beginning there were several partners on drafting the NDC. When it was on adopting the NDC, there were a lot. We end up having like, I don't know, 2 or 3 at the beginning and 20 at the end. That means, when you have success, everyone is on board. So slowly but surely get to your success.
Thank you so much, Alona. And of course, we are running out of time now, so I would like to go to conclusions of our today's discussion. Thank you so much to our amazing speakers. I think it was quite a rich discussion today, and some of conclusions that I have noticed during our discussion. So first of it is that we are evolving and we have improved in making NDCs as a global society. We became more efficient and implementing and developing the NDCs and other climate documents, and NDC is fully transforming into the instrument as it was intended, as the main instrument of the Paris Agreement, of achieving the Paris Agreement goals. The capacity development and cooperation between different stakeholders at different levels. So all of our speakers have drawn their attention that it's the most important thing in the NDC process and the climate policy implementation. Whole of society approach and whole of government approach. All of the stakeholders of the climate policy need to be on board and need to be informed about the climate policy and what the government is doing, not during the development of NDCs and other climate policies, but during its implementation. And adaptability, I have drawn the attention to this one because we are working under a lot of uncertainty and under harsh conditions in Ukraine and in a lot of countries of our region. So one of the solutions would be to be creative and developing new solutions and using NDC as the instrument to answer all of these existing questions at the national level. And while closing our today's panel discussion, I would like to finish it with a very good thing. I would like to congratulate our dearest Alona on her birthday, and I would like to wish you all of the best, not only in your personal goals, but also in climate goals in Moldova. And I invite all of you to congratulate Alona with a round of applause. Congratulations, Alona, and thank you for being a partner and a good friend of Ukraine. And you're always welcome in our pavilion and in Ukraine. Thank you so much, dear colleagues. And we are closing today's panel. Thank you so much to our panelists online. And thank you for our guests. Wishing you a great day.